Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I want to hear an amazing story. So as a child growing up in South Central Los Angeles, Larry Elder had a secret. Elder's father, who was a janitor, was black. So was Elder's mother. So were 80% of the people in their neighborhood. And to all appearances, Larry Elder seemed black too. That's what the people around him always assumed. Little did they know that this child of South Central, apparently an African-American in good standing, was in fact a secret agent working on behalf of global white supremacy. What an assignment. A white supremacist in South Central. Imagine that. And yet for more than 50 years, no one had any idea this was going on. Larry Elder spent decades in the public eye as a radio show host, and not one person during that time guessed the terrible truth. And then last month, the crack investigative team at the Los Angeles Times finally broke this story. Quote, Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy, read a headline in the newspaper. You've been warned. Busted! So how did the LA Times discover this? Well, it took real journalism. There were none of the usual telltale signs. Nobody caught Larry Elder resegregating water fountains or burning a cross on somebody's lawn. No, it was far more subtle than that and much more dangerous. Instead, Larry Elder publicly insisted on exercising his constitutional rights and then running for political office. Worse and more damning, Larry Elder criticized the leadership of the Democratic Party of California. He even went so far as to run against the sitting governor, Gavin Newsom. And that's how you know that Larry Elder is a white supremacist. He challenged an incompetent liberal white guy who is personal friends with Nancy Pelosi. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what racism is. The question is, now that we know this, can Larry Elder win anyway? We'll find out in 3 weeks. If Larry Elder is elected, he will not only be the first black governor of California, he will also be the most popular statewide official in recent memory. That's the interesting thing. For a purported democracy, California has a long history of electing people that polls show just about everyone who actually lives there hates. It's an awfully strange kind of democracy that way. Dianne Feinstein, for example, has represented the state of California in the U.S. Senate for nearly 30 years, and yet her approval rating is just 35%. Yet somehow she keeps her job anyway. How? Kamala Harris did the same thing. When Kamala Harris ran for president, only 7% of California's Democratic voters said they supported her. And that makes you wonder how Harris got elected in the first place to anything. But don't ask. A question like that would be what we call the big lie. So shut up and accept it. The interesting thing is that California voters don't technically have to accept it, because a century ago, voters in that state amended the Constitution to allow the recall of demonstrably awful politicians who'd unfortunately taken office. So let's say you had a pompous, low IQ governor who was totally incapable of managing his own empty personal life, but at the same time, who, for his own perverse reasons, seemed totally intent on destroying the entire state. What would you do with the guy like that? Well, on September 14th of this year, next month, California voters will have the chance to fire him. They have a recall option. If a majority decides to recall Gavin Newsom, then the replacement candidate who gets the most votes will become the governor. And as of tonight, that is likely to be Larry Elder. Larry Elder could actually win. So no wonder the LA Times is so upset. No wonder they dispatched a crack investigative team to discover he was secretly a white supremacist. Even dim old Gavin Newsom, who in the best of times seems only vaguely aware of his surroundings, who has what they say in the military, no situational awareness, even that man, dopey old Gavin Newsom, has finally started to figure out he's in very serious trouble.
I think this is important to know. Larry Elder's running away with this on the other side. I just hope folks, I want to level set with you. What could happen on Election Day if we don't turn out in historic numbers to vote no on this recall? Think about the judges he'd appoint. Who would he have appointed to replace Kamala Harris in the U.S. Senate? How would that impact the trajectory of this country? What would this mean, the future of the Democratic Party?
Ooh, did you see the fear in his Botoxed eyes? That, ladies and gentlemen, was a cry for help. And guess who heard it? Oh, the media in California. They work for him. And so they immediately got to work. Here's an actual line from a story produced by the so-called news division of the LA Times. Quote, "One issue was Elder's pronunciation of the N-word. He used an exaggerated tone, enunciating the ER at the end of the word rather than using the A pronunciation, which is more commonly accepted among and used by black people, studies have shown." Studies have shown, really? Studies done by which researchers, in which social science laboratories, and who exactly is funding these studies on the N-word and how it's pronounced? Unfortunately, the LA Times did not explain any of that. There was no footnote to the story. Instead, the paper just kept going. It dispatched one of its crack investigative reporters over to MSNBC, the natural venue, to report their findings.
He says he doesn't believe sanctuary laws or citizenship for dreamers should be happening. He's against in-state tuition, health care, and driver's licenses for the undocumented. How serious are the chances that this guy could be the next governor of California?
Well, it's very serious because it's possible that the majority of the people who are going to turn out are the people who are excited by Larry Elder's brand of, extreme far right beliefs. And he just represents an incredible threat to immigrant rights and racial justice, the immense progress that California has made on these issues. And it would set a catastrophic precedent that would reverberate across the country.
And it's ironic. This is a black man, and it just goes to show you that it is true that even people of color can be influenced by white supremacist narratives and fall victim to it, right?
That's got to be the greatest clip ever played on cable television, ever. So here you have the lady from the LA Times explaining to the Harvard race lady that the real problem is that voters might be too excited to vote for Larry Elder. They might be psyched about their own leader. And that would set a terrible precedent. Oh, yes, says the Harvard race lady, absolutely. Here's a black guy who's been brainwashed by the white man. And voters might like it. That's a threat. This democracy thing is a threat. CNN is deeply concerned as well. So CNN mobilized its goons, too, a crack unit it describes as the leading investigation team for the social media mobile generation, if you can even imagine. So they dispatched this team. What did the team find? Well, they found more thought crimes. For example, and we're quoting here, Larry Elder even has challenged mainstream orthodoxy on subjects like violence against women. Can you imagine? Larry Elder, quote, even challenged orthodoxy? Yes, even orthodoxy. And not only that, CNN also discovered that, quote, Elder has long relished making provocative comments in his time as a radio show host. Wait, provocative comments too? When will this nightmare end? It's starting to sound like Larry Elder might not be just like everyone else in politics, and that's disgusting. It is, as the LA Times informed us, a terrifying trend. On the other hand, it's entirely possible, trying to stay open-minded here, that some voters in California might like it. Why would they like it? Possibly because the people who currently run their state have destroyed it completely. To name just one among many examples, those people have arbitrarily released more than 75,000 prison inmates, including violent felons. Now, the point of this, of course, was something called equity. Never described, but frequently on display. What was the result of this? Well, here's the result. Watch.
Out in the open, free-for-alls, like the one that happened at this Walgreens on Monday, have spiked over the past year, with brazen thieves clearing shelves of food, cosmetics, and over-the-counter drugs that are often resold on the street. Home Depot shared pictures of recent busts of entire warehouses filled to the rafters with stolen drills, nail guns, and other tools. A witness captured this wild scene on Monday as a crowd of thieves stormed Neiman Marcus. No one was hurt, but the group made off with handbags and other designer goods that will most likely be resold online, where organized retail crime is thriving.
So they never do define equity, do they? The new president used the word equity more than any other word in his inaugural. But what is it? Oh, that's what it is. Equity is stealing. It's ripping off power tools from Home Depot. It's taking handfuls of lipstick from Walgreens. It's stealing. So where do we get here? How do we get here? Well, this is what happens when you let the ideologues on Twitter control your state. By the way, the social media revolutionaries are not simply in charge of criminal justice policy in California. They've also taken complete charge of the energy grid. Right. Gavin Newsom has ordered the state to transition to something called renewables, another term that's never defined. in 9 years by 2030. What's the result of this? Well, it's a lot like what's happening to Walgreens. The lights don't work. The air conditioning has gone dead. California frequently runs out of power. It's Zimbabwe on the Pacific. Ooh, don't say that. Tough. It is. And everybody who lives there knows it. Unless you're Rob Reiner and you've got your own generator. But Gavin Newsom doesn't care. He just keeps destroying California. Why does he hate California so much? In his first year as governor, homelessness, people living outside, defecating on the sidewalk, jumped 7% statewide. In LA County, it jumped 13% in 1 year. Have you been there recently? Well, 3 years ago, an official from the UN did show up. He came to San Francisco. That's the city that Gavin Newsom once ran as mayor, the city he promised to rid of homelessness, make it possible for women to jog in Golden Gate Park again, but he didn't. So the UN official showed up. Clearly, he's seen a lot of bad places. He said California was so bad that what he saw, quote, constitutes cruel and inhuman treatment and is a violation of multiple human rights. Was he overstating the case? Here's what it looks like.
This isn't camping. These are homes. You see fighting, guns, knives, fires, drug use day in and day out.
You don't realize sometimes what you're living in the middle of until you see a video and you think, wait a minute, that's where I live.
There was a cleanup today. So how often do they do this clean?
Oh, this is the first one in months.
Months?
Months. This is not humane. This is not compassionate.
If I was a councilman, I would be down here right now, man, talking to you, talking to these people, saying, what are we going to do about this, man?
The city councilman has allowed them not to have a rock bottom.
Oh, did you see that racist lady at the end complaining that there are mentally ill drug addicts right in front of her store destroying the city? Oh, another white supremacist. So why is this happening? Well, you get what you put up with. That's the first thing to note. The second thing to note is that California may be the only place in America where homelessness actually is a connection to housing prices. That's not true in most places. It is true in California. Median home prices in the state of California are now north of $800,000. First time it's happened ever. A lot of reasons this is happening. Massive foreign investment from China is one of them. No one's even bothering to stop that because they're taking payoffs from the real estate developers. But the bottom line is that normal people can't afford housing. What has Gavin Newsom done to help them? Not one thing. Who is he helping? Well, he's spending his time and your money awarding, among other things, free health care to hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals who snuck in. We used to call them illegal aliens. They're foreign nationals with foreign passports, but they're getting free health care from you. It's like a joke, but it's not a joke. It's happening in our biggest state. So next month's recall may be the last chance to save the state of California, and you should want that because it matters because it's our country. But it's also about something bigger than just one state. This recall is a test of our democracy. The question is, do elections still have meaning? Are voters still allowed to choose their own leaders? Or does the LA Times get to do that? Does the party apparatus get to do that? Do we have any power at all as citizens? Or are they going to steal it from us? If the answer is they're going to steal it from us, then we're in trouble. Once citizens conclude that their votes are meaningless, they quickly become radical. Democracy is the safety relief valve that keeps our society placid. But when people think it's fake, they go bonkers because they have no option. They have no power. They have nothing to lose. So it's in the interest of all of us that the state of California conducts a free and fair election next month. Yes, with outside election observers. UN, you're welcome to. Why? Because there are indications that it won't be free and fair. Just yesterday, police in Torrance, California announced they had found hundreds of stolen recall ballots in someone's car. What were the ballots doing there? Oh, we don't know.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.